Hour 7 of an 8-hour shift, and Dr. Gareth Mallory's hands would not stop shaking. He stood over the treatment bed where a Lyth child lay dying. Namii, 6 years old by human reckoning, though her species measured time differently. Her translucent membranes, which should have shimmered with the iridescent beauty characteristic of healthy Lyth, hung torn and sagging like wet paper. Through the gaps in her collapsing form, he could see the bioscaffolding they had installed 3 days ago, struggling to hold her together. The harmonic monitor screeched. Her frequencies were destabilizing again. His neurologist, Dr. Sienna Beaumont, appeared at his elbow. Her face was pale, her own hands trembling from cellular damage. "Gareth, your exposure limit is in 40 minutes. You need to prep for rotation." Mallory adjusted the resonance dampener, trying to calm the chaotic vibrations emanating from Nami's failing body. Those vibrations were killing him. Harmonic resonance syndrome, the medical reports called it. The frequencies disrupted cellular function at the molecular level. 72 hours of cumulative exposure was fatal. He'd already logged 61 hours over the past 9 days. "She won't last 40 minutes, he said. Beaumont checked the monitors. She knew he was right. The modified protocol isn't working on her. She's one of the paradox cases. We need to try something else, but that means extended contact, continuous treatment for at least 4 more hours. That'll kill me." "Yes." Nami's membranes rippled weakly. She was conscious, aware. Her species didn't lose consciousness the way humans did. She would be aware until the end, feeling everything as her body tore itself apart. Mallory thought of his own niece, back on Earth. Thought of every child he'd ever treated. Thought of the oath he'd taken 20 years ago, young and idealistic, believing medicine could save everyone. He increased the dampening field strength and adjusted his stance for a longer procedure. "Get me the experimental harmonic sequencer, the one Dr. Hargrove was developing." Beaumont stared at him. "Gareth, no. 1 more hour of exposure and your cellular integrity drops below viable. You won't recover." "Then I better make it count." 6 weeks earlier, Mallory had been sitting in a bar on Station Mendel, watching the galaxy give up. The holographic display above the counter showed the same news feed on repeat. Kaviri medical frigate returning from Lythara Prime. Manifest, 300 physicians departed, 0 returned alive. The insectoid Kaviri, known throughout the Galactic Collective for their methodical approach to medicine and their remarkably resilient biology, had failed completely. Dr. Mira Castellan sat across from Mallory, nursing a whiskey she wasn't drinking. "It's over. The Lyth are done. 14 billion people, gone in 4 months." "The Kaviri evacuated too early," Mallory said. He'd been reviewing the mission data for 3 days straight. "They panicked when their people started dying. They left before completing the treatment protocol on anyone." "They left because staying would have killed all of them," said Dr. Declan Ashbury, who joined them an hour ago and was now doing calculations on a napkin. Ashbury was perhaps the finest reconstructive surgeon Mallory had ever worked with, and right now he was calculating death rates. Harmonic resonance syndrome has a 100% fatality rate at sustained exposure. There's no treatment that doesn't require sustained exposure. The math doesn't work. Mallory pushed his own untouched drink away. "What if we rotate? 8-hour shifts with extended recovery periods, slow the cellular damage enough to complete treatment before symptoms become terminal." Mira looked at him like he'd suggested flying into a star. "You'd need thousands of volunteers. The Lyth have billions of infected. Even with rotations, you're talking about catastrophic casualty rates among medical personnel." "So we don't save all of them. We save some, maybe a few million." "At what cost?" Ashbury asked. "I ran projections. Optimal scenario, you'd need 2,000 medical personnel minimum. With proper rotations and resonance shielding, you might keep fatality rates below 40%. Maybe. More likely it'll be 50 or 60%. The number hung in the air between them. 1,200 people dead. Minimum. Mallory met his eyes. "I'm going. Who's with me?" Mira was the first to break. "You're insane." "Probably, but I'm still going." Ashbury stared at his napkin full of death calculations. He was 41 years old, never married, but 3 months ago he'd met someone. Someone who made him think about futures and possibilities he'd never considered before. There was a ring hidden in his quarters on Mendel, purchased in a moment of optimism he couldn't quite explain. "I'm in," he said quietly. Mira closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted in her expression, the look of someone stepping off a cliff and deciding not to regret it. "You're both insane. I'm in too." The recruitment happened in pieces, not grand speeches in conference rooms. Mallory visited Dr. Leona Hargrove at her home on Mars. She was a pediatric specialist, 38 years old, with a son named Jace, who was currently in the backyard trying to teach their dog to catch a frisbee. "I can't," Hargrove said immediately when Mallory explained. "Jace is 8. He needs his mother." "I understand. But those children dying on Lyth Prime, they need someone too." She watched Jace through the window. The dog had caught the frisbee. Her son was laughing, delighted. "How many children are infected?" "Approximately 1.8 billion under age 10. Hargrove closed her eyes. "What are the casualty projections for volunteers?" 40 to 60% mortality. "So I have a better than even chance of coming home." "Statistically, yes." She was quiet for a long time. Then she called Jace inside, hugged him for what seemed like hours, and said yes. Military medic Auden Holloway sent his agreement via encrypted message from the frontier station where he was posted, short and direct. "I took an oath. Count me in." Dr. Sienna Beaumont was harder. Mallory found her in a genetics research lab on Europa, surrounded by data that meant nothing to him and everything to her. She was 34, brilliant, and running from something. "Why?" she asked when he made his pitch. "Because they're dying and we can help." "That's not an answer. That's a platitude. Why do you need me specifically?" Mallory took a gamble. "Because you're trying to outrun guilt, and this is the only way to do it." Her expression went cold. "You don't know anything about me. I know you lost a research team 4 years ago. Experimental treatment gone wrong. 6 people died. You've been burying yourself in work ever since, trying to prove you're still worth something." "Get out." He left his contact information on her desk. She messaged him 23 hours later. One word. "Yes." The volunteers came in waves, civilian doctors from Earth's hospital networks, military medics from across human space, researchers, nurses, medical technicians, people with families, people with decades of experience, people fresh out of medical school who should have had whole careers ahead of them. Mallory watched the registry count climb. 437 after the first day, 891 after 3 days. On the 5th day, it crossed 500 and he started to believe they might actually reach the threshold. The counter stopped at 2,000. Exactly. As if the universe had a sense of dramatic irony. On Lyth Prime, Matriarch Lysara was arguing with her chief physician about whether to condemn another species to death for the crime of compassion. Lysara's membranes hung in tatters, whole sections of her body visible through gaps that should not exist. The fracturing had taken her 3 months ago, and she'd been dying slowly ever since. Around her, the Grand Council chamber of the Lyth Conquered stood mostly empty. Half the council was dead. Half of those remaining were too sick to attend. Physician Oral stood before her, his own form beginning to show the telltale signs of deterioration. "The humans will die. The Kaviri died in days. Human biology is less resistant to our harmonic frequencies. They will die faster." "Then we condemn them by accepting their help," Lysra said. "We condemn them by existing. The fracturing spreads through harmonic contact. We are a communal species. We cannot isolate without destroying what makes us Lyth. The humans understand this. They have studied the Kaviri data. They know the cost." Lysara's membranes rippled with distress. "How many do they send?" 2,000 medical personnel. They project they can treat approximately 2 million of our people with rotating shift schedules. 2 million out of 14 billion. It was nothing. It was everything. It was 2 million souls who might live to see another sunrise, purchased with human blood. "I cannot," Lysara said. "I cannot bear witness to another species sacrificing themselves for our mistakes." "Our mistakes?" Orel's frequencies shifted with confusion. Lysara had not told him, had not told anyone, but she knew. The fracturing was not natural. It was old Lyth bioweapon technology, created 1,000 years ago during their last major war, supposedly destroyed. Somehow it had been released. Accident or malice, she didn't know. But her people had created the plague that was destroying them, and humans were volunteering to die fixing it. "Allow them to come," she said finally. but I will not forgive myself. The HMHS Vesper was 3 kilometers of medical technology wrapped in tungsten steel armor. Hospital ships were not meant to be beautiful, only functional. This one was both. 200 surgical bays, 5,000 patient beds, full manufacturing capabilities for medical supplies. It could serve as a mobile hospital for entire planetary populations. Today, it was being risked for a suicide mission. Admiral Thessa Ironwood stood on the bridge reviewing the escort assignments. 2 frigates, Mercy's Run and Nightingale. They would protect the Vesper during the 11-day journey through hyperspace and provide security once in Lyth space. Pirates have been active near Lythera Prime, she told Mallory during the pre-departure briefing. We'll have escorts, but if something goes wrong, if we get separated, the mission timeline becomes critical. Your supply shipments will be at risk. Mallory nodded. He'd planned for this. Supply redundancies, manufacturing capabilities on the Vesper itself, rationing protocols. But pirates were an unpredictable variable in an already catastrophic equation. Ashbury sat in the corner of the briefing room, datapad in hand, another message from his partner. They said if I die out there, they'll never forgive me. Mira looked at him. Will you go anyway? Ashbury smiled faintly. Already here, aren't I? The Vesper departed Station Mendel at 8:23 a.m. local time. Inside, 2,000 people prepared for war against an enemy that couldn't be fought, only endured. 11 days through hyperspace, 11 days of equipment drills and protocol reviews, and trying not to think about the casualty projections. Some people spent the time recording messages for families. Others threw themselves into preparation with manic intensity. A few just stared out viewports at the non-space between stars and wondered what they'd gotten themselves into. Mallory spent most of the journey in consultation with Beaumont, refining the treatment protocol. The Lyth physiology was complex. Their membrane structures were both their skeleton and their skin, held together by harmonic frequencies that had to be precisely calibrated. The fracturing disrupted those frequencies, causing the membranes to literally tear themselves apart. The cure was theoretically straightforward: harmonic stabilization to stop the deterioration, bioscaffolding to support damaged membranes during regrowth, and frequency resequencing to prevent reinfection. 14 days of intensive care, 94% success rate in laboratory conditions. Laboratory conditions didn't include doctors dying from exposure to their patients. On the 7th day of transit, Mira found Mallory in the observation deck at 3 a.m., unable to sleep. You need to rest, she said. I will, after. After what? After we've saved 2 million Lyth? After we're all dead? After what? Mallory stared at the distorted starlight streaming past. After I know we've done everything possible. Mira sat beside him. That girl you lost, the 7-year-old with cancer. You're still trying to save her. Every doctor has ghosts, Mira. Not every doctor drags 2,000 people into hell trying to put those ghosts to rest. He didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence until the observation deck's automated lights cycled to simulate morning, neither of them having slept at all. The Vesper dropped out of hyperspace on the morning of the 11th day, and Lythera Prime appeared before them. From orbit, it looked almost normal. Blue oceans, green landmasses, the massive crystal formations that gave Lyth cities their characteristic rainbow refractions. Beautiful, peaceful. Then they descended through the atmosphere, and the truth revealed itself. The landing coordinates Lysara had provided took them to Sanctuary Bay, the planet's largest medical complex. The facility was designed to serve millions. Now it housed perhaps 50,000, and even those were dying. But Mallory didn't see the facility first. Instead, as the Vesper's landing ramp lowered, he saw a child. She stood at the edge of the landing platform, perfectly healthy, her membranes shimmering with iridescent light. Young, perhaps 6 years old. Alone. Dr. Leona Hargrove stepped off the ramp beside Mallory. Is that one of the infected? I don't think so, Mallory said. Not yet. The child approached them with the curious fearlessness of someone too young to understand danger. Physician Orell appeared behind her, his own form showing early signs of deterioration, but still functional. This is Namii, Orell said. The translation software converted his harmonic frequencies into comprehensible words, though something was lost in the process. Emotion, perhaps. nuance. She was sent by Matriarch Lysara to guide you to the medical facilities. She has not yet contracted the fracturing. Yet? Mira asked. Her parents are in the quarantine zone, Namii said. Her voice through the translator was high, clear. I cannot see them, in case I am infected and do not know it. But I am probably infected. Everyone gets infected eventually. She said it with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who had watched her world end and found a way to keep functioning anyway. Come, she continued, I will show you where the sick ones are. The walk through the Lyth settlements was a study in slow-motion apocalypse, families separating at designated boundaries, healthy members on one side, infected on the other. Entire districts abandoned, crystal structures dark and empty, and everywhere, the quiet. The Lyth communicated through harmonic vibration, meaning their cities should have been filled with a constant low-frequency hum. Now, there was only silence. Namii explained as they walked. We used to have festivals here, light refraction celebrations. Everyone would sing together and the whole city would turn into rainbows. But singing spreads the fracturing. So we stopped. She pointed to a massive building. That was a school, my school. But children spread the fracturing fastest, so schools closed first. She kept walking, kept explaining, kept being helpful in that devastating way children have when they're trying desperately to be useful in situations they don't understand. Then they entered the medical facility, and helpful explanations stopped mattering. Hundreds of Lyth lay on specialized beds designed to support their failing forms. Medical equipment hummed and beeped. Lyth physicians moved between patients with exhausted efficiency. And the patients themselves suffered in full consciousness, watching their own bodies collapse, unable to do anything but wait for the end. An elder Lyth on a nearby bed noticed the humans. His membranes were torn nearly to shreds, bioscaffolding visible through gaps in his form. He vibrated a quiet frequency. Aurel translated, Thesson says welcome. He says you are either the bravest beings in the galaxy or the most foolish, possibly both. Mallory approached the bed. Tell Thesson we're doctors. We're here to help. The translation went both ways. Thesson's response came through as, I have heard this before. The Kaviri said the same. They died. We know. And yet you came anyway. Yes. Thesson's membranes rippled in what might have been a laugh or a sob or something untranslatable. Your species is incomprehensible, but I am grateful for your incomprehensible kindness. The entrance to the medical bay dilated open. Matriarch Lysara entered, and Mallory understood for the first time what the Lyth had lost. She had been beautiful once. He'd seen archival footage during his research. Now, whole sections of her body sagged and tore, membranes barely holding together. She moved slowly, carefully, each step seeming to cause pain. Dr. Mallory, she said, thank you for coming. I wish you had not. He'd prepared speeches, practiced introductions, planned how to handle this moment diplomatically. Instead, he just said, we're here. We're staying. Let us help. You will die. Some of us, not all. That is still too many. Mallory met her eyes, or what passed for eyes in her species, complex light-sensing organs deep within her membrane structure. With respect, Matriarch, that's not your decision. We've made our choice. Lysara was silent for a long moment. Then, I will assign Physician Aurel as your liaison. He will translate medical data and assist with cultural protocols. But know this, Dr. Mallory, when your people begin dying, I will not be able to forgive myself. Or you. She left without waiting for a response. Namii tugged at Mallory's sleeve. Matriarch Lysara has the fracturing too. She is very sick, but she works anyway. She says leaders do not get to rest. The child looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. Are you going to die too? Mallory knelt to her level. I don't know. I hope you do not. I like you. It was perhaps the most devastating compliment he'd ever received. The next 36 hours were controlled chaos. The Vespers crew deployed modular medical facilities throughout Sanctuary Bay. Resonance shielding was installed in every treatment room, based on Kaviri designs, but improved with human engineering. It wouldn't prevent harmonic resonance syndrome, but it would slow it by approximately 30%. Every little bit helped when the alternative was death, Supply lines were established, shift schedules finalized, the 2,000 volunteers divided into 50 teams of 40, deployed across 8 treatment facilities. Rotation schedule, 8 hours on, 40 hours recovery. During recovery periods, personnel would undergo cellular regeneration therapy to counteract the damage. Beaumont set up a genetics analysis lab to monitor both Lyth and human cellular responses. Ashbury coordinated the surgical teams. Hargrove took charge of the pediatric ward, where infected children waited for help that might never come. Mallory spent the time reviewing data, double-checking calculations, and trying not to think about the fact that in 14 days, at least 800 of these people would be dead. At 11:48 p.m., the night before treatment was scheduled to begin, he found Ashbury in the surgical prep area, staring at his hands. "Second thoughts?" Mallory asked. "Always, but I'm still here." Ashbury flexed his fingers. "I looked at my cellular regeneration baseline. It's 23% below human average. I'll accumulate damage faster than most." "You could transfer to a support role." "No, I'm a surgeon. People need surgery. I do surgery." He looked at Mallory. "I got another message from my partner. They're furious. Said I'm throwing my life away for strangers." "Are you?" Ashbury smiled faintly. "No, I'm investing it. If I survive this, I'm going to propose. Bought a ring before we left Mendel. 3 carats, traditional cut. I figure if I make it through this mission alive, I've earned the right to some happiness. And if you don't make it, then at least I died trying to save someone. That's more than most people can say." The protocol began at 6 a.m., Lythera Prime, local time. 8 treatment facilities activated simultaneously. 15,000 Lyth patients began receiving care in the first wave, the largest coordinated medical intervention in human history, conducted under conditions that would kill approximately half of everyone involved. Mallory worked the first shift personally, in Facility 12, treating Thesson the Elder, who'd called them incomprehensible on arrival. The work was delicate and exhausting. First came harmonic stabilization, using resonance dampeners to calm the chaotic frequencies tearing Thesson's membranes apart. This alone took 3 hours of constant monitoring and adjustment. Then, membrane reconstruction. Bioscaffolding carefully attached to anchor points, supporting damaged tissue and providing framework for regrowth. One wrong move and the patient's entire structure could collapse catastrophically. Ashbury performed most of this work, his hands steady despite the tremors that would come later. Finally, frequency resequencing. Using calibrated harmonic generators, they reset Thesson's natural resonance patterns to baseline healthy levels. This prevented reinfection and allowed proper healing. 8 hours, 1 patient stabilized, 13 days to go. During the procedure, Thesson remained conscious. The Lyth didn't sleep like humans. He watched them work, felt everything, and around hour 5 he asked a question. "Why are you doing this?" Mallory adjusted the harmonic sequencer. "You're dying. We can help. But you will die too." "Maybe, maybe not. The odds favored death." "For some of us, yes." Thesson was quiet for a while. Then, "I have lived 82 cycles. Your years approximately 160. I have seen much, done much. My life has been full. You are young. Why trade your future for the remnant of mine?" Mallory didn't have a good answer. Or rather, he had several answers, none of them complete. Because someone had to. Because it was right. Because he'd taken an oath. Because a 7-year-old girl had died 6 years ago and he was still trying to save her. Instead, he just said, "Because you're worth saving. I am one person. Yes, and that's enough." The shift ended at 2 p.m. Mallory's team rotated out. A new team rotated in. Thesson's care continued uninterrupted. Beaumont ran post-shift diagnostics on Mallory, cellular stress markers, tremor analysis, organ function panels. The results were not encouraging. "You're showing early signs of harmonic resonance syndrome," she said. "Mild tremors in your hands, elevated markers for cellular breakdown. Nothing critical yet, but it started." That was faster than projected. "You were in direct contact with a highly unstable patient. The exposure was higher than baseline." She made notes. "Rest. Actually rest. Let your cells regenerate as much as possible. The next shift will hit harder." He followed orders. 40 hours of rest, cellular repair therapy, and trying not to think about the symptoms developing in his body. Then, back to it. By the end of day 3, all 2,000 medical personnel were showing signs of HRS, some mild, some severe. And then Dr. Roland Whitaker collapsed mid-shift, and the mission's first crisis began. Whitaker was an anesthesiologist, 43 years old, quiet and methodical. He'd been monitoring sedation levels for a complex membrane reconstruction when his legs simply gave out. He hit the floor hard, convulsing, blood vessels rupturing in his eyes. Ashbury was in the same surgical bay. He abandoned his patient mid-procedure and rushed to Whitaker. His cells are literally tearing apart. The shielding isn't enough. They got Whitaker to medical. Beaumont worked on him for 6 hours, pumping him full of cellular regeneration accelerators, trying to reverse the damage. It wasn't enough. His cellular integrity had dropped below 30%, irreversible, but he didn't die, not immediately. Instead, he lingered in critical condition, conscious and aware, feeling his body fall apart at the molecular level. He survived 4 more days in agony before his organs finally failed. Mallory stood over Whitaker's body in the morgue, looking at the first casualty. Not the first dead, but the first to fall. More would follow. The question was how many. Mira found him there at 2:30 a.m. "You need to sleep." "I can't. Gareth, we're 3 days in and we've already had 1 catastrophic case. The shielding isn't as effective as we calculated. The exposure rates are higher. The projections are wrong." "Then we adapt." "How?" "We can't reduce shift lengths without requiring more volunteers. We can't increase recovery periods without extending the overall protocol timeline. The math doesn't work." Mira grabbed his shoulder. "Then we make it work. That's what we do. We adapt. We solve problems. We save who we can." She was right. But knowing she was right didn't make it easier to look at Whitaker's body and know there would be more. Day 5 brought a new problem they hadn't anticipated. Beaumont was in the genetics lab analyzing patient response data when she noticed the pattern. Some Lyth were having paradoxical reactions to the protocol. About 8% were getting worse despite treatment. She brought the data to Mallory at 11:15 p.m. "Their harmonic frequencies are adapting. The disease is evolving in response to our treatment." Mallory reviewed the charts. She was right. In approximately 1,300 patients across all facilities, the fracturing was accelerating when it should have been stabilizing. Their frequencies were becoming more chaotic, more unstable, more deadly to themselves and anyone near them. "We need to modify the protocol," Beaumont said. "Real time. For these patients, the standard treatment isn't working. We need something more aggressive. More aggressive means more exposure, longer shifts." "I know," Mallory did the math. 1,300 patients requiring modified treatment, longer exposure times for medical personnel treating them, higher casualty rates. The projections that had suggested 40 to 60% fatality were suddenly looking optimistic. He made the call anyway. "Start developing modified treatment parameters. We'll test on volunteer patients first, then scale up if it works." "And if it doesn't work?" "Then 1,300 people die who might have been saved. That's not acceptable." Beaumont nodded and went back to her lab. Neither of them slept that night. Day 6 started with an attack. The supply ship from Earth had jumped into the system at 4:40 a.m., carrying medical materials, bioscaffolding components, and replacement resonance shielding. It never reached Lythera Prime. Pirates, 3 ships, fast and aggressive, had ambushed the supply vessel in deep system space. The escort frigates engaged, but the pirates had targeted the supply ship specifically. By the time they were driven off, the vessel was damaged and venting cargo. Admiral Ironwood contacted Mallory at 7:15 a.m. with the news. "We recovered about 60% of the cargo. The rest is debris. Next scheduled supply run is in 4 days." 4 days. They had current supplies for perhaps 5 days at full treatment capacity. The math was tight. Any complications, any unexpected usage, and they'd run out before resupply. Mallory gathered his department heads at 9 a.m. Ashbury, Beaumont, Hargrove, Holloway, the military medic, and a dozen others. "We're rationing," Mallory said. "Bioscaffolding production is prioritized. Resonance shielding materials are secondary. We can tolerate higher exposure rates more easily than we can tolerate failed treatments." Hargrove spoke up from the pediatric division. "My department needs bioscaffolding for our patients. We can't prioritize. Children's membranes are more fragile. Without proper scaffolding, they'll die." "I understand." But we need to triage. Triage means choosing who lives and who dies. Yes. The room went silent. Triage was standard medical practice in crisis situations, but there was a difference between academic understanding and actually making the choice. Physician Orell, who'd been observing quietly, spoke. Prioritize the young. Logical choice. They have more life ahead of them. Mallory shook his head. We treat everyone. We find a way. There is not enough material. Then we manufacture more. Beaumont, can you modify the bioscaffolding formula to use alternative components? Beaumont considered. Maybe. It'll be weaker, less effective, but better than nothing. I'll need 6 hours in the lab. You have 3. She left at a run. Orell watched her go. Human sentiment will doom more patients than it saves. Logic dictates prioritization. Mallory met his eyes. Then I guess we're illogical. Day 7 brought 2 critical decisions. First, Namii had contracted the fracturing. The healthy child who'd guided them on arrival was now one of the infected, her membranes beginning to tear. A paradox case. The standard protocol wasn't working. Her condition was deteriorating despite treatment. Mallory reviewed the modified protocol parameters, 6 hours minimum of continuous contact. His exposure limit was already critical. This would likely kill him. I'll do it, he told Beaumont. Gareth, you're already at 61 hours cumulative exposure. This will push you past fatal thresholds. Then I better make it count. Meanwhile, in another wing, Hargrove made her own choice. A young Lyth child named Venna, age 4, lay dying from the same paradoxical response, another 8%er whose frequencies were adapting to overcome treatment. Ashbury found Hargrove in the pediatric prep area, reviewing the modified protocol parameters. Leona, don't. Her name is Venna. She's 4 years old. She has no one. You have a son. I know. Hargrove's hands were steady as she prepared the equipment. But if I don't do this, I won't be able to look at him. This will kill you. Probably. But she'll live. That's the trade. Ashbury wanted to argue, to stop her, to physically restrain her if necessary. But he'd already made the same calculation himself. Every volunteer had. They were all choosing between someone else's life and their own, over and over, shift after shift. He couldn't stop her when he'd made the same choice. I'll monitor your vitals, he said instead. If you start crashing, I'm pulling you out. No, you won't. Leona, promise me you won't. Promise me you'll let me finish, no matter what. Ashbury looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the acceptance of what was coming. I can't promise that. Then I'm glad you're not a liar. She entered Venna's treatment room at 3:35 p.m. and began the modified protocol. 6 hours of continuous contact. The child's chaotic frequencies disrupting cellular function with every passing minute. Harmonic resonance syndrome accelerating in Hargrove's body at catastrophic rates. By hour 4, Hargrove's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the instruments. By hour 5, blood vessels were rupturing in her eyes, leaving red streaks across the whites. By hour 6, she was trembling head to toe, barely standing. But the treatment worked. Venna's frequencies stabilized. Her membranes began regenerating. The child would live. Hargrove collapsed at 9:41 p.m., 11 minutes after completing the procedure. Ashbury's team had been waiting outside. They rushed in, got her to medical, ran every intervention they had. Beaumont reviewed the diagnostics and delivered the verdict at 11:05 p.m. Cellular integrity at 18%. Catastrophic organ damage. She has maybe 3 days. Mallory was simultaneously treating Namii in an adjacent facility. Hour 7 of his shift, his hands shaking violently. The modified protocol was killing him, but Namii was stabilizing. When Beaumont reached him with the news about Hargrove, he was barely conscious, still adjusting the resonance dampener on Nami's bed. He sat with Hargrove in medical later that night. She was conscious, lucid, but fading. Every breath seemed to hurt. Is Venna okay? Her first question. Yes, stable, responding to treatment. You saved her. Hargrove smiled through the pain. Good. That's good. You should have waited for backup. We could have. If I'd waited, she would have died. Hargrove coughed, and Mallory could see blood on her lips. I'm a pediatrician, Gareth. I've spent my entire career caring for children. This is what I do, what I am. You have a son who needs you. I know, but Venna needed me too. And I chose. Maybe that makes me a terrible mother. Maybe it makes me a good doctor. Maybe it makes me both. I don't know, but I'm not sorry. She died 36 hours later at 9:22 a.m. on day 8. Cellular breakdown had progressed too far. Her organs failed one by one, her body literally tearing itself apart at the molecular level. Mallory informed Venna personally, with Aurel translating. The child stood very still for a long moment, her newly stabilized membranes rippling with emotion too complex for translation. Then she asked if she could see Dr. Hargrove's body. In the morgue, Venna stood beside Hargrove for a long time. Then she extended one small membrane appendage and gently touched Hargrove's hand. Her membranes vibrated at a frequency that made the air hum. Aurel explained it was a mourning song, a way of saying goodbye. When it ended, Venna looked at Mallory. Why did Dr. Leona die for me? Because you matter. Because your life has value. I do not understand. Someday you will. Until then, just remember her. Mallory also visited Namii, still recovering from her treatment. Dr. Hargrove saved another child today, a girl named Venna. Dr. Hargrove died so Venna could live. Nami's membranes rippled with understanding. Like you saved me? Yes. Day 9 brought fractures in the human ranks. Beaumont found Mallory in the command center at 2:15 p.m. She looked exhausted, damaged, her hands shaking from accumulated cellular stress. We need to talk, privately. They found an empty conference room. Beaumont locked the door. I want to evacuate, she said. Mallory had been expecting this, but it still hit hard. Okay? That's it? Just okay? You're a volunteer. No one's forcing you to stay. If you want to leave, leave. Beaumont laughed, but there was no humor in it. I can't. That's the problem. I want to leave. I want to run. I want to save myself, but I can't actually do it. She sat down heavily. 4 years ago, I was leading a research team. Experimental gene therapy for a neurological disorder. We thought we'd accounted for all variables. We hadn't. The treatment triggered cascading organ failure in 6 patients. They died over 3 days while we watched, helpless. It was my protocol, my mistake, my responsibility. That's why you're here, Mallory said. You're trying to save yourself by saving others. Is it working? I don't know, is it? Beaumont was quiet for a long time. We've lost 12 people. We're dying for a success rate that's good but not perfect. I keep running the numbers, keep trying to justify it, keep asking if this is worth it. And what answer do you get? I don't know. I genuinely don't know, she looked at him. Tell me it's worth it. Make me believe. I can't. You have to decide that yourself. That's a terrible answer. It's the only one I have. Beaumont sat with that for a while. Then she stood. I'm staying. But not because you convinced me. Because I can't convince myself to leave. Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe it is. She left. Mallory stayed, wondering how many others were having the same conversation with themselves. At 6:30 p.m., the fracture became public. The mess hall was crowded with off-duty personnel trying to eat, rest, recover. Beaumont arrived, still shaking from her earlier breakdown. Someone made a comment. She responded. Voices rose. We're dying for nothing. We knew the cost. Knowing isn't the same as accepting. Mallory arrived as the argument escalated. Personnel taking sides, fear and exhaustion turning into anger, the mission threatening to tear itself apart from internal pressure. We've lost 12 people, someone shouted. He didn't know who. For what? A success rate we could have achieved with safer methods? Ashbury answered. There are no safer methods. The Kaviri tried safe. Everyone died anyway. At least we're saving patients. Are we? Or are we just dying slower? Mallory raised his voice. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. No judgment, no shame. But if you stay, you follow the protocol. We finish what we started. Easy for you to say. You're in command. You get to make the big decisions while we die implementing them. It was a fair criticism. Mallory had been taking shifts, exposing himself to the same risks, but he was also coordinating overall operations. His exposure time was lower than most. Before he could respond, Beaumont spoke. I wanted to evacuate today. Told Dr. Mallory directly. You know what he said? He said, leave if you want. No pressure, no guilt, just choice. The room quieted slightly. I'm staying, Beaumont continued. Not because I'm brave or noble, because I'm trying to fix something unfixable in myself, and this is the only way I know how. Some of you are here for better reasons, some for worse, but we're all choosing. So choose. Slowly, the tension diffused. People went back to their meals, their rest, their preparation for the next shift. But the fracture remained, invisible but present. Fear was accumulating along with cellular damage. Day 10 brought revelation. Lysara requested a private meeting with Mallory at 9 a.m. They met in her personal chambers, a space of surprising beauty despite the decay. Light refracted through carefully positioned crystals, creating patterns of color that shifted with movement. I have discovered something, Lysara said without preamble. About the fracturing, something I should have told you before you came. Mallory waited. The fracturing is not natural. It is old Lyth bioweapon technology, created approximately 1,000 cycles ago during our last major war, supposedly destroyed. Somehow it was released. Accident or malice, I do not know. But my people created this plague. The weapon was designed with a 90-day asymptomatic incubation period. By the time the first symptoms appeared, harmonic transmission had already exposed every Lyth on the planet. The words hung in the air between them. So we're dying to fix your mistake, Mallory said quietly. Yes, and I bear that guilt. Every human death is purchased with Lyth error. How do I reconcile that? Does it change anything? The infected didn't create the bioweapon. They're still dying. You're still dying. It changes my culpability. Maybe. But that's your burden, not ours. We didn't come here to judge. We came to help. Lysara's membranes rippled. How? How can you help when we have caused this ourselves, when we are responsible? Because responsibility for the past doesn't change need in the present. You need help. We're offering it. The origin story doesn't matter. It should matter. Why? Would you feel better about dying if the plague were natural? Would that make the suffering more acceptable? Lysara had no answer. Mallory continued, gentler now. You're looking for a way to refuse our help that feels morally acceptable. You want us to judge you, condemn you, withdraw our aid so you don't have to watch us die. But that's not happening. We're here. We're staying. And you can't guilt us into leaving. Then what do I do with this knowledge? Use it. Help us. Stop being a passive observer and become an active participant. You're a political leader. You understand systems and logistics. Be useful. It was perhaps the harshest thing he'd said to her, but Lysara's membrane stilled, then shifted into a pattern Aurel had once explained, meant acceptance. Yes, she said, you are correct. If I bear responsibility for the plague, I also bear responsibility for its cure. Tell me what you need. This moment, hour 7 of treating Namii, hands shaking uncontrollably, watching the harmonic monitor screech. This was when Mallory knew for certain he was dying. The modified protocol was saving her, but it was killing him. Beaumont had warned him, go past 61 hours cumulative exposure and recovery became unlikely. He was now at 67 hours and climbing. Day 11, Mallory started dying. He'd been pushing himself harder than anyone, taking extended shifts, treating the most unstable patients. His cellular regeneration rate was average for humans, but his accumulated exposure was well above average. Beaumont ran his post-shift diagnostics at 3:45 p.m., and her expression went carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that meant the news was bad. Your cellular integrity is at 34%. Any lower and it's irreversible. Mallory looked at the numbers. She was right. He was approaching the threshold where no amount of regeneration therapy could save him. How long do I have? If you stop now, maybe you recover? If you take another shift? Days. How many patients are left in the 8% category? The paradox cases. The ones requiring the modified protocol Hargrove had died creating. Mira, who'd been listening from the doorway, answered. About 500 in this wave. Gareth, no. I'm not asking permission. You're asking us to let you die. I'm telling you I'm taking another shift. What you do with that information is up to you. He walked past her. She grabbed his arm. You're not invincible. You're not special. You're just one doctor, and we need you alive to coordinate this mission. He met her eyes. Thesson is one of those 500, the elder I treated on day 1. He helped me understand something about why we're here. I owe him. You owe him nothing. I owe him a chance at survival, same as everyone else. He pulled free and headed for the treatment facilities. Behind him, he heard Mira say something he chose not to hear. Thesson was in critical condition, deteriorating despite standard treatment, one of the paradox cases where the fracturing had adapted to overcome the protocol. He needed the modified treatment, 6 hours minimum of continuous contact. Mallory entered Thesson's treatment room at 4:20 p.m. The elder recognized him despite his failing vision. "Dr. Mallory, you should not be here." "Neither should you, but here we are." "I am old, you are young. This is an inefficient trade." Mallory set up the modified protocol equipment. "Then I guess I'm inefficient." He began treatment. The modified approach required higher harmonic exposure, closer contact, longer duration. Thesson's chaotic frequencies tore through Mallory's cellular structure like acid, disrupting function at the molecular level. By hour 3, his hands were shaking. By hour 5, he could feel his organs beginning to fail, that peculiar sensation of systems shutting down. By hour 6, he was barely conscious. But Thesson stabilized, frequencies calmed, membranes began regenerating. Mallory completed the final resequencing at 10:27 p.m. and collapsed. He woke up 3 days later. Medical bay, white ceiling. Mira sitting beside his bed, eyes red from lack of sleep or crying or both. "You're awake," she said. "Beaumont said you might not wake up." Mallory tried to speak. His throat was dry. Mira gave him water. "How long?" 3 days. Your cellular integrity dropped to 12%. By all medical logic, you should be dead. Instead, you're just mostly dead. You'll live. Barely. Thesson? Alive, stable, responding to treatment. You saved him. Mallory closed his eyes. The relief was overwhelming. "We're on day 14, Mira continued. Final day of the protocol for the first wave patients. The statistics are coming in." "How many?" "Human casualties confirmed so far, 12 dead in the first wave, with more in critical condition. Approximately 140 personnel showing signs of permanent cellular damage. But Gareth, many of the critically injured are still declining. Beaumont projects final casualty rates around 70% when accounting for delayed organ failure and accumulated damage from continued exposure." She paused. "Lyth patients treated in the first wave, 15,100. Survivors, 14,300, 94.7%. The protocol worked." "Was it worth it?" Mira asked, the question everyone had been asking in various forms since this started. Mallory thought about Thesson, about Namii, about the thousands who would live to see tomorrow. He thought about Hargrove and Whitaker and the others who wouldn't. "Ask me again when I can think straight," Mira smiled faintly. "The Galactic medical directive is furious. They're talking sanctions, expulsion from the collective, the whole bureaucratic punishment system." "Let them talk." "The Lyth want to build a memorial, something about crystal structures and light refractions. Lysara says it'll be visible from orbit." "Tell them to build hospitals instead. Make sure this never happens again." "I already did." Mallory tried to sit up, failed. His body wasn't responding properly yet. "Where's Ashbury?" Mira's smile widened slightly. "Video calling his partner, proposing. I think they said yes." For the first time in 2 weeks, Mallory felt something other than exhaustion and grief. Hope, maybe, or just the simple satisfaction of knowing some things still worked out. "Help me up," he said. "I want to see the final statistics." "Beaumont left them on your data pad. And Gareth, she's still alive. Her cellular integrity stabilized at 19%. She'll recover." More good news. Mallory let himself believe it, just for a moment. Day 16 brought the final accounting. In the command center, Mallory reviewed the complete mission data. Beaumont had compiled everything: patient outcomes, volunteer casualties, supply usage, protocol effectiveness rates. 15,100 Lyth treated across 8 facilities over 14 days. 14,300 saved from the first wave. Success rate 94.7%. But they didn't stop there. As word spread of the protocol's success, additional volunteers arrived, both human medical personnel who joined after seeing the initial results, and Lyth physicians trained in the new techniques. Lysara herself coordinated the logistics, transforming from passive observer to active partner. Over the following months, they expanded operations, more facilities, more teams, more waves of treatment. The rotation system proved sustainable. Personnel who survived the first cycle recovered and returned. New volunteers replaced those who couldn't. 118 treatment cycles later, they reached the final number, 1.89 million Lyth patients treated. 1.79 million saved. Human medical personnel deployed over the entire mission, 2,000 initial volunteers with rotating additional support, bringing the total to approximately 3,400. Casualties, 141 dead, including those who died in the days following protocol completion from accumulated damage. Permanent injuries, 1,187. Overall casualty rate among the original 2,000, 71%. Among the total deployed, 42%. Ashbury appeared in the doorway, his hands still trembling slightly from cellular damage. His partner had said yes. He wore the confirmation like armor against the guilt. Drevik from the Galactic Medical Directive is requesting communication, Ashbury said. Want me to tell him you're still recovering? No, I'll take it. Drevik's hologram materialized. The Kaviri medical overseer looked stern, his insectoid features arranged in what was probably disapproval. Dr. Mallory, the directive has reviewed your mission. The casualty rates among medical personnel are unacceptable. You have violated the spirit of the Kesteven Accords. Formal sanctions are being considered. Mallory waited. There was more coming. However, Drevik continued, his tone shifting, 127 species have petitioned the directive requesting amendments to the Kesteven Accords. The Lyth initiated this petition. They call it the Terra Principle. A new hologram appeared beside Drevik. Lysera, fully healed now, her membranes shimmering with perfect health. The Terra Principle acknowledges that medical ethics sometimes requires sacrifice, she said. That preservation of the physician cannot always supersede preservation of the patient. That medical personnel should have the right to choose acceptable risk levels when treating otherwise untreatable conditions. More holograms joined, species after species endorsing the principle. Drevik's posture shifted. The Kaviri also support this principle. We lost 300 physicians attempting to help the Lyth. We thought it was futile. We were wrong. If we had stayed, accepted the sacrifice as humans did, we could have saved our patients. Instead, we chose self-preservation over service. He looked directly at Mallory. The directive will adopt the Terra Principle. Medical personnel retain the right to volunteer for high-risk interventions. Sanctions are withdrawn. Instead, we acknowledge that humanity has taught the galaxy something important about medical ethics. The communication ended. Mallory sat in silence. Mira appeared. We won. 141 people are dead. 141 people died, saving 1.79 million others. That's not loss, that's legacy. Maybe she was right. Mallory wanted to believe her. 3 weeks later, the HMHS Vesper prepared for departure. Repairs complete, survivors stabilized, time to return home. Lysara came to see Mallory one final time. Before you leave, I wanted you to know what the Lyth have decided. What's that? We are rebuilding, restoring our civilization, but one structure will remain exactly as you left it. The medical facilities you built, we call it the 2000. A memorial. Thank you. We are also establishing medical scholarships. Lyth students studying medicine will receive full funding. The first class begins next cycle. Namii has enrolled. She wants to be a doctor, like Dr. Leona. Mallory felt something tight in his chest. Hargrove would have liked that. I still do not fully understand your species, but I am grateful for your incomprehensible kindness. Lysara extended a membrane appendage. Mallory took it gently. The contact sent a clear, pure harmonic through his hand. Respect, gratitude, friendship. The galaxy is better for having humanity in it. Thank you for proving that. 6 months later, Mallory sat on a bench outside Earth Medical Headquarters, watching the sunset. His cellular integrity had stabilized at 8.3%. He would never fully recover. His hands still trembled. Walking required a cane. He'd been medically retired from active duty. His datapad chimed. New message from Namii. He opened the video. The Lyth child appeared, healthy and vibrant, her membranes shimmering with perfect iridescence. She stood in what looked like a classroom. Dr. Mallory, I wanted you to know I'm studying medicine now. Because of Dr. Leona, because of you, I will save others as you saved me. I do not fully understand why humans do what you do, but I'm grateful. We all are. Thank you for showing me what it means to be worth saving." The video ended. Mallory watched it twice more. Mira appeared, sat beside him without asking. Jace asked about his mom, Hargrove's son, asked if she was a hero. "What did you tell him?" "I told him she was better than a hero. She was a doctor." They sat in silence, watching the sun descend toward the horizon. "We lost 141 people, Mallory said. "We saved 1.79 million. Still feels like we lost." "That's because you care. That's why it worked." Mallory's datapad lit up again. Another message. Subject line: medical emergency, Celcozy system. Volunteers needed. He looked at it. Mira saw it too. "You're not seriously considering this?" "I can't, not physically, but someone needs to." "Gareth, can you forward me the mission brief?" Mira closed her eyes, opened them. "You're impossible." "Probably." She pulled out her own datapad, began reviewing the Celcozy situation. "Looks like a pandemic. Unknown pathogen, high mortality rate. They're requesting medical intervention." "Survival rate for medical personnel?" "Early estimates suggest 20% fatality if proper protocols are followed." 20%. Better odds than Lythera Prime, worse than most missions. "Someone should go," Mallory said. "Someone will, but not you. You've done enough." Maybe. Or maybe there would never be enough until the galaxy stopped needing people willing to try impossible things. The sun touched the horizon. Light refracted through Earth's atmosphere, creating colors that reminded Mallory of Lyth crystal cities, of rainbows built into architecture, of beauty created deliberately, maintained intentionally, defended desperately. "Make sure they have proper resonance shielding," he told Mira, "and cellular regeneration protocols, and rotation schedules that actually account for individual physiology, not just averages." "I will." "And make sure they know what they're signing up for. Complete transparency. No sugarcoating the casualty rates." "I will." "And, Gareth, I know. I'll make sure they're prepared." He nodded. Trusted her. Had no choice but to trust her. The sun set completely. Stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Namii was studying medicine. Thesson was rebuilding his settlement. Lysara was leading her people toward a future that almost hadn't existed. 141 names were carved into a memorial on Lythera Prime, surrounded by 1.79 million lights representing saved lives. It had been worth it, all of it, every sacrifice, every loss, every moment of pain, because someone had to, because they deserved it, because it was the right thing to do. Mallory stood, leaning heavily on his cane. Mira stood with him. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "Been home for 6 months?" "You know what I mean." "Yeah." They walked together toward the medical building, leaving the sunset behind. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new impossibilities, new people needing help that seemed beyond giving. Tomorrow someone would volunteer anyway, because that was what humanity meant, showing up when everyone else left, trying when the odds were impossible, giving a damn even when it cost everything, and doing it anyway.